Fartlek is a term that we love and know in the endurance world, and particularly in a training sense is a really useful session that we get a lot of benefit out of. But today I just want to talk about exactly what Fartlek actually is and make the clear distinction between the actual foundations and where Fartlek stems from and how to do an actual Fartlek session versus what we might see out there and was sometimes termed Fartlek but may not always be the case. So today we're going to break down this principle of Fartlek training. Hey guys, Nick here. Welcome back to the channel talking science of endurance and everything sports science in general. Thanks to everyone who's already subscribed to the channel so far, but if you haven't, please consider hitting that big red button down below to keep up to date with all the latest content coming up on the channel. This video today really is stemming off the back of a session that I just completed earlier on, a Fartlek session, and it's a term that we throw around all the time and we often hear a lot is, oh, we're going into a Fartlek session or we're doing some Fartlek running, we're doing a mono Fartlek session is a really popular one in the running community. But what does it actually mean? So starting right back at basics, this term Fartlek is actually a Swedish term and it means speed play. So fundamentally, we're talking about a dynamic changing of speeds throughout a session. Now, based on the original meaning of the term and the original definitions of Fartlek and this speed play concept, it's a randomized set of speeds. So we're constantly changing the speeds, but there's no structure to it. There's a bit of a dynamic environment going on. So to give you a bit of an insight into, the session that I did today and this genuine Fartlek was, I didn't go out with necessarily a plan or a structure. I went out, did a bit of a warm-up, so got through the first K and a half just to get the body moving and warmed up, progressively building some speed, did some strides, etc. But once I settled into my run, it was just a case of I was picking out landmarks along the way, and I actually like to do this type of run along a trail instead of along just normal concrete or around a track or an oval or things like that, purely from the fact that it gives me this variety and it gives me some, difference to my training. But running along the trail, I was looking for different landmarks and different points of the run that I know where I've been running before or things that I can see to then determine how I'm going to change the speed. So what does that look like? That looks like, all right, I know this section is approximately 600 to 800 meters long, so I'm going to run more of a tempo speed through this section. I know that I can see the tree up there about 200 meters up. I'm going to work as hard as I can on a slight uphill to get to that tree, but once I get to the tree, then I'm going to walk for about 100, 200 meters, and then I'm going to start jogging again. It's the type of thing I'm constantly changing up the paces. So what we get here is a really good combination of some aerobic and some anaerobic adaptations as a result of these mixing intensities. Because there's no structure, we're getting a bit of both, and that's where it's been really useful as a methodology in training and why Fartlek's been so popular over quite a long period of time as a training method or a training style. Is because we're targeting a whole bunch of different adaptations in the body. Primarily, we're looking at aerobic adaptations, so things like improving our cardiovascular system, whether that be increasing our stroke volume through left ventricle size, but then also the high intensity efforts. So when we've got low intensity, we're increasing left ventricle size so we can pump more blood out per beat. The high intensity efforts, doing some sprints or some short bursts, some of those like 20-second type efforts, things like that. They're going to be more working on the hypertrophy of the heart, so how forcefully can we pump the blood out per beat, also increasing our stroke volume. That as a result, greater stroke volume for the same cardiac output is going to bring down our heart rate. Things like our ability to extract oxygen and use it at working muscles, some of the high intensity efforts are going to be beneficial there. Some of the low intensity efforts are also going to work on things like pulmonary diffusion. So we're getting a really good combination of these aerobic adaptations that we would normally get by doing a combination of some long, slow base Ks in the week and some like zone 2, for example, and some high intensity VO2 type work or maybe some threshold type work. But then we're also mixing in some of these more anaerobic adaptations. There might be some short work to rest ratio. So you might do an 800 meter odd section where you're running from the beginning of where we on the trail that I run. There's these little gate entrances. So from gate entrance to gate entrance, or from this tree to the tree I can see up there, or the monument, or the picnic table, whatever it may be along the track. These different places is I might run for 5 to 6 minutes at a more tempo pace and then do a short burst of speed for maybe 10, 15 seconds and then have a minute and a half sort of recovery, if you like, very slow jog or walk. And it's these constant changes in intensity with mixing up the work to rest ratio. So at some points I'm getting a bit more recovery, some points I'm getting not much recovery at all. And it's particularly those ones where I'm not getting much recovery. That's where I'm getting really good anaerobic adaptations. And what do I mean by that is the things commonly associated with 2-to-1 work to rest, 3-to-1 work to rest, where we're maybe improving some of that ability to tolerate lactic acid in the system, our ability to buffer lactic acid, dump bicarbonate to get rid of some of that acidity, tolerate some of that acidity from a mental aspect, being able to feel the burn in the legs and go, okay, I'm going to push through. a little bit of the mental game starts to come into it in terms of these constantly changing aspects. So the ability to repeat efforts and push again and again and again might also replicate things like surges and changes in intensity during a race. So all of these things combined, we end up getting quite a well-rounded session. We're targeting a lot of aspects of our physiology. That's a traditional fartlek session where it's kind of random, there's not much structure to it. The main difference between that and something like a mono fartlek, and I'm going to use that as an example, and not to say I don't like that session, I absolutely love the mono fartlek session because it's a really high quality, well-known, but also it's a really positive session to get some quality adaptation out of an athlete, particularly starting to tune up for some of those shorter, sharper races. Things like 5K, it's perfect for. Even up to 10K, I really like to use it, and just building a bit of that lactate tolerance in the legs for some of the longer distance events as well is quite useful. But it's the type of thing that technically that isn't really a fartlek session. Yes, we are having some changes in speed and a bit of speed play happening, but we're actually doing it in a very structured way. So now it actually becomes a bit more of an interval training session. And that's really where I guess the definition truly lies between fartlek and interval is a structured set of on efforts or working efforts followed by a structured set of recovery efforts based on a work to rest ratio on some specific prescribed intensities. Whereas fartlek is this constant dynamic changing environment where we can change it based on any variable. If we feel like we want to run for a little bit longer and a little bit harder, we can, but then we back it off and then we might do a bit of a sprinting effort and then we might walk for a bit. There's no, I guess, defined plan before we go into the session. We're going to mix up the speeds and we're going to go for maybe 45 minutes or we're going to go for an hour or we're going to go for half an hour, but there's no, here's what you have to do. Whereas a mono fartlek session, we know is 90 seconds on, 90 seconds off. Repeat that twice. You might have an extra bit of recovery in between depending on what type of mono fartlek you do or how you like to structure it. But then we go into our 60-second efforts, then we go into our 30-second efforts, then we go into our 15s. It's here's the work to rest ratio and here's the on efforts and the off efforts. Then we move into the next block and here's the speeds we have to do, which is much more of a traditional interval session. Where it gets that fartlek term is because there is some changes in speed and we're going 90 seconds on, then we're 90 seconds sort of jogging, then we back up and there's no true recovery in terms of a walking sense. At the end of the day, it isn't technically a fartlek session unless it is dynamic and random. So hopefully that gives you a bit of a perspective of that, the true definition of what fartlek is, but also a bit of an insight into how effective it is as a training method. It's not just a case of going out and just doing random stuff. There is a process to it and there is a benefit to it. It's not the type of thing you necessarily want to do all the time. That's probably the last thing I'm going to leave you with here is changing it up too much and doing that every session probably isn't going to be great because it quite often induce quite a high amount of fatigue, particularly if you're adding in lots of really high intensity bursts and short recoveries. Like today, I'm pretty sort of tired after my run, after doing sort of 50 odd minutes, just under 10Ks worth of fartlek, really varying my intensities, big spikes in terms of going up basically as hard as I can and then coming right back down to a very slow walk and at even stages having a quick sort of pause to recover. So I'm covering a lot of ground. There's a lot of fatigue in the legs. So it's something you don't want to do every run. At the moment, I'm doing 3 runs a week and it's just one of my runs in the short block of training that I'm doing, about 4-week block. I'm going to keep it in here. Then I might move on and try something else in terms of that session. Throwing it in once in the week or throwing it in a training cycle to mix it up is really good. But keep in mind, there are some really positive benefits to doing it, but you just got to be smart about how it fits in and around the rest of your week. And just be smart about, all right, I'm going out and I'm doing it because I want to get a bit of this mix of aerobic and anaerobic. And particularly for those athletes who are in lockdown periods at the moment and trying to vary up their training. They're not working into a particular race because all races have been cancelled or postponed or events have been postponed. It's a good session just to keep it a bit interesting. For me personally, as more of that team sport athlete, if you like, from a footy umpiring perspective, or if you are a football player, a soccer player, basketball, a fartlek type session is a much more replicative of what you're going to do in a game because you don't get to choose before what happens with your intensity. You kind of have to make it up as it goes along. You're very reactive. And I also like using a fartlek session if I'm running with a partner, not at the moment, but typically at the moment, and getting the other person to, I guess, say and define some of those points, and we can alternate so that each of us are having to react to it, because that's going to simulate more what you would expect in a game situation or more what you expect in a race situation. If you're having to pace off others and set the pace, surge, but then you have to go with someone else's surge, and then we both start to slow down, recover, and it's this sort of dynamic environment. Can be really quite interesting and keep the training engaging, but give you something in terms of really good stimulus from aerobic and anaerobic adaptations as well. But primarily it's working on the aerobic side. Again, that's a bit of a summary of fartlek. Let me know in the comments down below if you use fartlek training in the traditional sense, or if you haven't really thought about the difference between fartlek and traditional interval training before, and if you even knew that there was a bit of a difference there. Let me know what you think down below. As always, please keep hitting that big red subscribe button down below to support the channel. That is it for today, and we'll see you in the next one.